Yes, you
Yes,
are.
sir.
Okay. So welcome all, especially Dr. Dalip Mavalankar and our board members and also all participants. I think the session will be very, very useful with the experience and expertise Professor Mavalankar has. Professor Dalip Mavalankar currently is Director, Indian Institute of Public Health, Gandhinagar, and he has been Director since 2012. He received his MBBS and MD in Preventive and Social Medicine from Gujarat University in Ahmedabad and MPH and Doctorate in Public Health from the John Hopkins University. He has worked as faculty in Medical College Ahmedabad, National Institute of Health USA, Indian Institute of Management Ahmedabad, and Columbia University. He has been providing consultancy to many agencies, including the World Health Organization, UNICEF, DANIDA, UNDP, World Bank, and Columbia University. Dr. Mavalankar has been actively involved in health and family welfare issues, including health policy analysis and implications for program management. Dr. Mavalankar has earned various national and international awards and honors. He was appointed by Government of India in 2005 as member of the Mission Steering Group of National Rural Health Mission. He is currently chairing the Technical Working Group on Maternal Health constituted by Government of India, and he is also member secretary of the COVID task force appointed by Government of Gujarat. This is the brief profile of Dr. Professor Mavalankar. And so regarding health issues, there are many health issues, and Professor Mavalankar may be choosing some of them. The health issues include these achieving universal health coverage and delivery of quality health services, availability of drugs, diagnostics, shortage of specialists, doctors, and paramedical, and professional public health cadres in states, public health infrastructure for primary, secondary, and tertiary healthcare in the villages, towns, sub-district, districts, and state and national level. Issues relating to medical education and health education and promoting telemedicine, increasing access to services, improving overall governance, managing epidemics and natural disaster management, promote medical education, digitization of the public health records of all individuals, developing robust health information systems and health information networks. India to act as pharmacy of the world and also manufacturer of the medical equipment. Ensure adequate public spending on health, increase capacity of the public health system to judiciously use the allocated funds, provide health insurance cover for sudden health expenses to protect families from being driven to poverty trap. Improve and strengthen regulatory framework relating to service quality, service cost, regulation and accreditation system for clinical establishment. Then there are social determinants of health like nutrition, water supply, sanitation, cleanliness, and pressure. So the issues are many, and Professor Mavalankar will be touching some of them. So let us listen to him. So I invite Professor Mavalankar to initiate his speech or lecture.
Yeah. First of all, thank you very much to all. I hope it is audible to you. Thanks to Dr. Ratan Chand and to Sri Charan Singh ji for inviting me to give this talk. I was pleasantly surprised when Dr. Ratan Chand called. I have been knowing him since he was Chief Director of Statistics, and he has been so much helpful that time. So when he requested, I could not say no. So I said, this would be interesting audience to not only talk, but also listen to their point of view, because we hardly get opportunity to interact with economists and people interested in economics. So I took up this opportunity. So thank you very much. Let me share my presentation. I'll see if I can share my presentation and we will start from there. I hope, are you able to see my presentation? Are you able to see my presentation now?
Yes, we are able to see.
Okay. So the topic given was my vision of public health in India. And Dr. Rachan Chand sir gave me some guidelines to talk about. So, and he has given a long list, but I'm not going to cover the whole list because it will take long time. What I thought is some of the topical things and some of the things which are required, I'll talk about, and then we will have a discussion. So first, I want to begin with this COVID vaccination. We are greatly delighted that we have two vaccines or two vaccine manufacturers in India, and we were the sort of most happy when these vaccines were officially launched and licensed for emergency use in India early in January. And our vision is to vaccinate as fast as possible. But I'm going to give you some numbers and see what we have landed up with. For example, it is very clear that our country is a continent of 138 crores people. If you take 60%, which is adults, because the vaccines are only for adults, it comes to like 83 crores. If you count 2 doses, it is 166 crores. And then if you divide by 12 months, it is 13 crore doses or roughly 14 crore doses per month. And you divide by 30 days, it is 40 lakh doses we have to give. So that is a simple maths. Currently, we are giving half the number of doses, roughly 20 lakh doses. So it will take about 2 years at this speed to vaccinate everybody. So which is not really what we want. Our vision is as fast as possible. So if you take the vaccine manufacturing capacity, which is 5 crores per month in Serum Institute, 2 crores in Bharat Biotech, so 7 crores. If you take the doses required, it is again coming to about 24 months to make those doses. So it is also clear that we can't vaccinate faster because we don't have the supply. Now, these calculations, I don't know why the country as a whole, I'm not blaming anybody or asking anybody why nobody realized which a maths 7th standard student should be able to do. We don't need a PhD to do this calculation. And now we are stuck saying that we must increase the capacity and we can't be waiting 24 months to get everybody vaccinated. Now, had we started in July 2020, when the first candidate vaccine appeared and started its third phase trials, we would have calculated. Pardon? Are you able to hear? Hello? Okay, so July 2020, if we have started and started increasing the vaccine capacity, calculating from there, we would have been in a better position. Even giving orders, we first order, as I understand, was given in early January with 3 crore doses when we required 166 crore doses. That time, Serum Institute had 10 crore doses already made. Later on, April, we gave order of 15 crore doses. So the question is, why is this happening? And we can discuss that. Then the second issue, which I want to start by saying that we are a billion people country, but Abdul Kalam had said in one of his very famous quotes that we think as if we are a million people country. So we had two suppliers, one buyer, and we thought this is very bad. It's not a perfect market for economists. This is very oligopolistic market and oligopolistic buyer. So we decided that this is not good. So we can't increase the suppliers, so let us increase the buyers. So our policy changed to saying states should buy, private sector should buy. So from one buyer, we went to 33 buyers, at least state governments and maybe more with private sector. So it became a competitive market. So the question is, will the rate go down with this? And obviously answer is not, rate will not go down, it will go up perhaps. And it had already started going up with this differential rate. So now we are looking for more suppliers of vaccine and how to increase the production. So in some sense, the lesson is that can we think ahead of time as a government, as people, as a society, as economists, as health personnel, of what should we have 2 years, 5 years from hence, and start working on that. And in all these things, in the vaccine, we had not expected, but the second wave came and almost 2 lakh people additionally died during the second wave. Fortunately, we are now sort of on the waning part of the second wave, and we will have to fix the vaccine supply issue. So I think the first thing which I wanted to say in my vision is that we should be able to at least do very simple calculations for a country of 1 billion. Not think that we are a 1 million country or 5 million or 10 million or many countries in one. And think of basic economies of scale, which should be in our public systems able to do. Plan ahead. The other side is, why didn't we pay the manufacturers? Because we were not perhaps willing to take risk. And some of you, I'm sure, have worked in government. You understand government better. I don't understand government policies and the ways of working so well. But paying a private manufacturer in advance seems to be a very risky proposition in an environment where we don't know whether vaccine will come up or not. Of course, Bangladesh government had paid in advance. Many other governments paid multiple times their vaccine requirements and booked them. So, okay, we did make some mistakes. So what is going forward? So the lesson is that we don't have a national adult vaccination program. Of course, we will scramble and this epidemic and pandemic will go and we will be able to vaccinate. Now we understand that about 2 billion vaccines will be available by December. But can we take this as a challenge to develop a vaccination program for flu, which we haven't looked at? In Western countries, there is a old age flu vaccination program. They buy vaccine of the new viruses which are going to come and stock it. And if that virus doesn't come, that vaccine is thrown away, because you can't be making a vaccine when a new virus or modified virus comes. So we have to also learn and develop an adult vaccination. Hepatitis B, of course, now it is in children's vaccine, but there are lots of adults who are not covered. Human papilloma virus, which is causing cervical cancer in women, and maybe other diseases, vaccines will come. So I think the first vision or this thing is, can we take this example of what we went through and are going to go through for next 1 month, year, and develop a national, and if national is not possible, even some of the states are bigger than many nations, so develop a state level adult vaccination program which will include such vaccines in future. So that was the first point. Second vision is to catch up with Europe's death registration system and cause of death analysis, which existed in the year 1665. under the name of Bills of Mortality of London. And I have 2 pages of that, the cover page and one of the pages of how systematically London compiled, analyzed, and printed the cause of death happening in London every week during 1665 and around that time for many, many years. This was the years where plague epidemics were happening, and if you can read it in this line, there is a 6,544 number. All other numbers are 45, 1, 2, etc. But just one line, plague, killed 6,544 people in this week, which is from 12th September to 19th September 1665. Now, will any one of you tell me that does your city, wherever you live, publishes such numbers even today on weekly basis? And my answer, at least as much as I know, is no. No city yet has caught up of the analysis of death in London, which was available in 1665. So you can't do public health without registering deaths and analyzing them. What is India's way of counting deaths is this, what we have been seeing on the TV. Drone pictures of all these fires in the crematorium, the Ganges in some parts with floating corpses, and we are guessing how many people died in this pandemic. The government number is 3 lakhs. The estimated number by, I don't know what to call them, anti-nationals or something like that, their number is 10 lakhs, 20 lakhs, something like that. So why is this? Why can't we record cause of death? So my other plea and this thing is each city should be able to record how many people died and how many cremations happened yesterday and compare it with what is the average it should happen given its population. So estimated normal mortality and yesterday's mortality or day before or last week's mortality. This is like a barometer for a weather person or a thermometer for a doctor, that it tells you that whether everything is normal or not. If your mortality is normal, whatever is happening by and large the state or country or city is okay. Now, why are the crematoriums full? If you do or know a little bit of demography, with 140 crore population and crude death rate of 7 deaths per 1,000, which is crude death rate per year, you will have roughly 98 lakh deaths per year in India, which is roughly say 1 crore deaths. If you divide it by 365, which is 27,400 deaths per day in India happens every day without any epidemic, pandemic, anything. It's a normal background mortality. Now, if you take government's number of 4,000 COVID deaths happening in India around that for last some days, weeks, which is roughly about 15% more deaths, the number will come to 31,400 deaths per day in India. Now, with just 15% additional deaths, why should crematoriums be overflowing? What is the crematorium's capacity utilization in India on an average any given day? You may have gone to crematoriums for some of your relatives before the pandemic. My rough estimate is 30% to 50%, 40% in the daytime. In night time, most of the crematoriums 0% utilization. So if you take 24-hour utilization, it will be half of this, 15 to 30% or 20%. So in that case, why is the crematoriums overflowing with just 4,000 deaths happening additionally in the country per day? So the answer is that there are a lot of more deaths happening, but we are not counting them as COVID deaths. So my plea is that please learn to count the dead and write the correct cause of death. Now, counting, I'm sure all of you will agree that it is not so difficult. Ahmedabad, for example, has something like 30 crematoriums and maybe 10, 12 burial grounds. So at the end of the day, I have to only total about 40 numbers, and each crematorium or burial ground will not have more than 5, 10 normally, maybe in this thing 20, 30, 50. So adding 50 numbers is a child's exercise, and I will know how many people died yesterday in Ahmedabad. But somehow our cities haven't thought that it is important to total up the number of deaths. The other side, which I showed you in the bills of mortality, is the cause of death. Now, here lies the main confusion in India and many doctors' minds, many experts' minds. Of course, ICMR has given good guideline for COVID, and earlier Director General of Health Services, taking from international guidance, have also given guidelines several years ago. Cause of death is not a rocket science. And in 5 minutes or 2 minutes, I'll show you, you can become also expert in analyzing cause of death of COVID. I'm giving you 4 rules for that. Rule number 1, if patient has COVID and other no comorbidity and dies, then of course everybody will agree that it is a COVID death. If a patient has pre-existing comorbidity like diabetes, high blood pressure, cancer, and then COVID and develops respiratory failure, can't breathe, you have to give oxygen, so his lungs are all filled up. He develops some complications of clotting and dies, then of course it's a COVID death, even though he had a pre-existing diabetes, hypertension. Because the question you have to answer, if COVID had not happened, would that diabetes fellow had died on that day? Or would that blood pressure fellow had died on that day? If the answer is no, then the precipitating cause is the underlying cause, which is COVID killed him. With diabetes, hypertension, cancer, people can survive for a long time. So that is a second example. Third example, and I put it in green, which is a little complicated. Suppose he tests very mild COVID, so just positive, no symptoms, all blood parameters you check, they are normal. So that means he has no oxygen requirement, his blood clotting, everything is normal. With some severe comorbidity develops and he develops a heart attack or stroke and dies, then maybe it is not because of COVID, because COVID had started but had not become so serious to kill him, but he had some other severe comorbidity which killed him, which are very few cases. So COVID is incidental and the main disease is heart attack, stroke, kidney, etc. The only complication is COVID in the second, third week or later on, if his blood parameters are not normal, clotting is increased, then it will cause all of this. And then still COVID will be the cause, not heart attack, stroke and kidney. Fourth, a COVID patient killed in a road accident. The cause of death is road accident, not COVID. COVID patient commits suicide. Still doubtful whether what will you classify, but it can be classified as non-COVID because it's a suicide death. He got so depressed because of COVID that he died. So with these 4 or 5 rules and with good guidance from ICMR, we are still not able to classify our deaths in a reasonable manner. Now, whose responsibility it is? Of course, it is the doctors treating people, and if the death happens, then maybe family to tell what happened, and based on that the registrar of death or the local person will have to enter the cause of death. But the RGI, Registrar General of India, all registrars of birth and death, please take note, and you should speak up saying what is happening to India. Why so many deaths are happening? Are they COVID, not COVID? If they are not COVID, then what is wrong? Is there some other virus? If there's some other cause, we should be worried. We can't just say it is not COVID and forget about it. And we see that thousands of people are dying. So the registrars of birth and death's duty is to tell us whether the overall mortality is normal or abnormal. If it is abnormal, why it is abnormal. And that is what we need to learn. And Europe has an interesting system. If some of you want to see, Euromomo is the site, MOMO, Euromomo. It gives you all European countries' weekly mortality with its comparison with the past trends, and will tell you whether in which week the mortality is more or less. Okay, I want to come to this. This is our government's logo. It means the victory of the truth, but it also implies that all must speak truth, and we should not obfuscate whatever we know and confuse people, because that will only lead to prolongation of this epidemic. Okay, moving away from the epidemic to an issue which happens every day, every night, every week, every month. And one of my friends, a senior IAS officer, now retired and was the health secretary of Gujarat, health commissioner, gave this name called Taj Mahal syndrome. All of you know why Taj Mahal was built. It was built by Mughal Emperor Shah Jahan in the memory of his wife Mumtaz Mahal, who died in 14th childbirth in Behranpur. So she had very difficult childbirth and she died. And the king was so much in love that he made this big monument. And it is world famous. It is India's great sort of tourist attraction, etc., etc. On the right-hand side panel, I'm showing you Queen of Sweden. Eleonora was her name. And she, around the same time, about 350 years ago, also had difficult pregnancy. And in Sweden, there was nobody who could save her or who could help her. The Swedish king sent this Swedish doctor, John van Vroon, to go to France, learn midwifery, come back and help his queen or his wife. And luckily, with this knowledge gained from France, this woman, the queen, was saved. But the king of Spain was so humiliated, felt so humiliated. How come I can save my own wife, but what about the rural women? They must be dying. This doctor cannot reach them. So he said to this doctor that go again to France, learn further, and come back and train all the rural dais or all rural midwives or all rural ladies who are doing delivery to conduct safe delivery. 300. He didn't spend his money building Taj Mahal, but he spent his money and orders and power to train rural women to conduct delivery. And this is the symbol of the 300-year-old Midwives Association of Sweden. And this is a picture of the box of instruments they used to carry 150 years ago, including obstetric forceps, including scissors, including medicines, etc. And if required, they would do surgery to remove the baby, not a cesarean section, but what is called as episiotomy, remove the baby from the lower side to save the woman. So they were empowered so much. They were trained, certified, and that is where the social priority was there in saving women. Sweden has a maternal mortality of 1 or 2 per 100,000 birth. We have about 100 per 100,000 birth. So if Swedish want to see Taj Mahal, they have to come to us. If we want to learn midwifery, we have to go to Sweden. So the point is, whatever social investment we as a society make, we will have to think in that direction. So don't think of Taj Mahals, but unfortunately, Taj Mahals are still being built. But our human resource investment in health and infrastructure and equipment is very, very less. Even now, nurses get paid 14,000 rupees a month on ad hoc basis, and they have to go on strike working in the COVID hospitals. You will be, at least Gujarat, there are several such news coming. Doctors are on strike, nurses are on strike, they are underpaid, etc., etc. Many posts are vacant. So many parts of the country, we don't have RT-PCR machines, which cost 6 lakhs rupees. It's not very expensive. Many districts don't have that. Oxygen plants, vaccine storage. Some of the new districts don't have, or even old districts don't have proper vaccine storage. Of course, CT scan, etc. should be there, but it's not there. And finally, zero attention to building repairs and maintenance. New building can and new Taj Mahal creation as our national passion, but we don't believe in maintaining and repairing and spending time and effort in making our assets more productive. So I want to come back to this unfinished agenda from 1% of GDP to 3% of GDP on health. We have been stuck at somewhere around 1.3, 1.2, I don't know, 1.4 maximum, but nowhere close to 3%. Only thing is, buildings don't only help unless they are having staff, equipment, well maintained. And we are seeing in many channels now, because of the pandemic, people are going to rural areas and finding out what is the situation, and not very good. In spite of our laudable effort of National Rural Health Mission, we still are building oriented system, not a service oriented. So our monitoring is how many PHC and subcenter and CHC buildings are built, not what is happening in there. So I think we have to also think of functionality of those services, not only the numbers of buildings. Third, I come to somewhat of, again, history. This is a very famous picture of Florence Nightingale in 1850s in a military hospital, which was very crowded. And she went there. She was not a nurse, but just as a society lady, curious to know why more people were dying in the hospital. British soldiers were dying in the hospital rather than in the battlefield. So she was very perturbed. This news appeared in the Times in England somewhere in this year. She read it and she became very, very upset, saying, how come young people are dying in the hospital? They should be saved in the hospital. So she went to the hospital, and this is what she saw. Overcrowding, no proper arrangement, no nothing. And that transformed her life. She made the hospital look like this after some time. So it was a sea of change. You see the light coming, you see the distance between the beds, almost 6 feet, 8 feet distance, heating being put, some medicine, etc., etc. So she transformed from this to this without any authority, by her own efforts, on her heart, her motivation, persuasion. Unfortunately, we have stuck to what Florence Nightingale did about 160 years ago. This is the design of the Nightingale ward. She made this ward, and that's what her name is. So one ward which will have several beds side by side and some nursing station, etc. And our public hospitals are still the same design. It's still designed on Florence Nightingale ward. Western countries have given up this ward long time ago. They have small single patient, two patient delivery rooms or patient wards, etc., in individual patient. And there's a lot of benefit to that. So my new vision is we should also now give up. Even in new AIIMS, we have this type of Florence Nightingale designed wards. Because we think the cheapest solution is the best, because it costs less. It costs less number of nurses, less number of money. But our vision should be to change. Why individual room? Advantage is less infection control, more infection control, less infection, better privacy, better patient experience. What are the implications? More nurses are needed. It is better, you need more nurses. You have better care, better outcomes, and more employment of women. Today's age and time, one nurse looking after 40 people in one ward at night is a prescription for high mortality. And that is what is happening in our hospitals currently under COVID, temporary hospitals. Nurses are looking after 20, 30 patients at night. So we have to change this. Related to that is we have to also change and promote nurse and midwife based care. India has 1.7 nurses per 1,000 population. WHO recommends 3 nurses per 1,000 population, which will mean India will need 42 lakh nurses. We have about half of them. Sweden, I saw my friend Dr. Ketan from Sweden. Sweden has 10 nurses per 1,000 people. If we use that ratio, we will need 1.4 crore nurses. I'm also not able to understand why Sweden needs so many nurses, but they have, and for a long time they have, and there is a social investment they have decided to make. And that's why they have one of the best health indicators, except in COVID, they made big mess and they are suffering from it. Okay, if we go to primary health care, the village level healthcare, we have one PHC with 1 or 2 doctors for 30,000 population, which was decided in 1985. Before that, there was one PHC for 1 community development block. Some of you who are old enough will remember this term called community development block, which was 1 or 2 lakh population. And Bihar still has that. So if you want to see the history of PHC, you can go to Bihar and still see it. Now, 1 doctor for 30,000 rural population, you compare with GPs in Britain. It is a 7-year trained GP, which serves 2,000 people on an average. So why is this difference? China created 1 barefoot doctor, they called doctor, but it is a health worker in 1960s and 70s for a village, which is roughly maybe 1,000. I don't know Chinese villages, but roughly 1,000 people per village, whatever is the village. We currently have 1 ANM for 5,000, which is an assistant nurse. ANM is a not fully qualified nurse. We made a provision of ASHA, a volunteer, partly paid volunteer for 1,000 in 2006 under NHM. And we say this is a great progress and everybody is gaga about the great things. Of course, ASHAs are very important. They are very, very helpful. They have helped us, but we are still stuck in the model of primary health center of 1985. So my vision, and I wrote this before the budget this year, that why not think of a nurse, a 3-year fully trained, and I call it community health nurse, for each one village. We have 6 lakh villages. If you take a nurse salary as 20,000 rupees per month, you will need about 20,000 crores per year to have 1 nurse per village. It looks like a big amount, but really it's not that big. If you look at the benefits, if she is staying, if you can make her stay there, she will have 24/7 availability of health service or some type of primary care service in the village, early detection of disease, early detection of epidemics. Even her productivity will go up, because what currently happening is 1 ANM is looking after 3-4 villages. She is itinerant. She moves from one village to another. Maybe half her time goes in traveling rather than serving people. So this could be another new vision of health system, a nurse per village. Let us move ahead and see how can we design. Can we have, like a British system has, 1 GP per family, one general practitioner doctor per family, using a card, using a health passport, using a smart card, whatever, and IT possibilities are many. UK has this, and it is free care. And all GPs are private doctors. So we have lots of private doctors. We have a lot of people who need private doctor care. So what GP system in Britain did is they contracted with the private doctors to provide free care to the people. So we can develop similar kind of system. The current system of OPD care is not covered under Ayushman Bharat PMJY. Only indoor care is covered, and out of pocket expenditure, which is 70% of the total health expenditure, of which 70% is outdoor expenditure, OPD. So we have to think of covering outpatient care in some ways. One of the simpler ways is to develop a voucher scheme. And I have given just notional number of 1,000 rupees per family per year, vouchers of 1,000 rupees. So annual expenditure, roughly there are about 25 crore families, will be about 25 crore, 1,000 crores per year. If you add 5,000 crores of management cost, it will be about 30,000 crore per year. In that amount, all families will get one GP, or at least some doctor they can pay 1,000 rupees in terms of voucher, and they can select. They can go to any doctor who is available. Of course, in villages, you may not have so many doctors. Choice may be limited. In urban areas, you may have more choice. Similar can be another scheme for medication, because out-of-pocket expenditure, large amount is on medication. So we have to also think of another scheme of the same magnitude to cover medication cost. And so total between medication and GP cost will come to about 6,000 rupees, 6,000 crore rupees per year. And you can then decide whether you want to give the whole country, half of the country, whether you want to give 1,000 rupees, 2,000 rupees, 500 rupees, is a matter of detail. But principle could be that the central government or state government will give a voucher and people will go. Think about that. And it can be smart card, Aadhaar, whatever IT platforms. My question to all of you, is it economically, politically, and administratively feasible, doable? And if so, why are we not doing? How can we do it? Finally, I don't want to forget about public health, because that is where we haven't progressed so much, and that is where our mortality statistics and many other things are lacking. So we need a national or a state level cadre of well-selected, well-trained officer on the pattern of Indian administrative service or Indian many other central services. Roughly about 5 to 10 officers per district, which will add up, and including municipal corporations will add up about 10,000 public health officers. Now your question may be, what do public health officers do? They do all this: surveillance, monitoring, analysis, outbreak, disease prevention. Now all of this, you know how important it is in the times of COVID. Communication, emergency preparedness and recovery, environmental health, research and health promotion. So all of this is the public health functions. It is not the function of a doctor. It is much beyond. Your doctor, if you have a doctor's background, it might help, but not necessarily. A nurse can do this. A science graduate can do this. And that is how many countries have their public health system open, like a MBA program, which is open to engineers, accountants, literature graduates, anybody, and can become a manager. Similarly, public health, national or state level cadre is required. Last 2 points, because Ratan Chandji had told me, telemedicine. It has a great potential, and it helped a lot in COVID pandemic, because many people, almost there is a recent study in Ahmedabad area, one university did, 95% of people were treated at home for COVID. 5% were hospital admitted, and they were treated through this type of telephone medicine or telemedicine. So we have to now, using this experience of COVID, push telemedicine to a national level and make it much more much more practiced, much more feasible and doable. And the best telemedicine systems, if you don't know, has been developed in Canada, because in Canada there are many remote areas which are called fly-in community. The only way of mechanism of reaching there is to send an airplane. So anybody sick in that community, government has to send an airplane. That person is evacuated. He comes to the base hospital, then he is checked and then sent back. So 2 air trips free of cost. So, and then they realize that this is too expensive. So they put in a very good telemedicine system. So their flight costs were so much reduced. So we can learn from many countries. Northern England, Scotland has also good telemedicine. Wherever there are remote areas, it would be very useful. Finally, social determinants, and I don't want to go into details because time is short. Already nationally, we have announced tap water in each home, but along with that, drainage in each home should be also there. Otherwise, we'll have mosquito-borne diseases and trouble with that. I want to add the need for a Pakka house for all. We can't be a great nation with half of our, or maybe more of our people living in kacha houses. And that is where with the cyclone and all this, we have so much of difficulty. And finally, universal health coverage system. And I talked about how do we cover outpatient. We have already covered some of the inpatient cost under PMJY. So it is only extension of that. And we can reach, looking at some of the Southeast Asian countries, China and others, Brazil, Malaysia, and Thailand, and see how we can develop a universal healthcare system. With that, let me thank again all of you, and I'll be delighted to have any questions where I can learn from you. Your comments are also most welcome. This is our campus. If any of you are coming to Ahmedabad, Gandhinagar, you are most welcome to visit us. Our students are not here. Of course, they are here, some of them in hostel, but we are here. So most welcome anytime. Thank you. So I will stop sharing now.
Yeah. So thank you very much, Dr. Mavalankar. I think this is an excellent vision and your point, your thoughts about the health system. So briefly, I think you have covered that how to vaccinate 83 crore population, adult population, then death registration and causes of death, then better wards, Nightingale wards. We should move to better wards. Then one community health nurse for each village. Then one GP for every family, covering of OPD expenses, national or state level public health cadre, that should be there. The telemedicine, to promote telemedicine, having Pakka houses and universal health coverage. So I could find these points, maybe many more are there. So I think excellent lectures. And now we can see if we have questions. Let me see if we have questions.
Yes. Yes, Jatan.
Yeah. I kindly you kindly go ahead, Vishwanath.
Yes. Thank you, Dr. Ratanjan. Thank you, Dr. Dilip. It was a masterful exposition. It was a wonderfully you covered from medical to paramedical and to the public at large. And I think you have covered the width and the depth of the subjects so enlightening. I have one small question. You correctly said, given the crude birth rate, the average number of deaths per day is about 27,000, and as per government reports, these are about 31,000, so 4,000 more. And how does it explain overcrowding of burial grounds and cremation? So, given the fact, assuming that whatever the reports on overcrowding of cremation grounds and burial grounds uh, be true, what will be the number of deaths according to your estimate?
So you're asking what is the number of deaths which I think they are happening overall? Is that the
Right.
question?
Right. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
correct.
My sense is roughly 5 to 10 times the number which is reported. And for example, Ahmedabad, if you take its population, there are, and we have done this. I'll give you some past work. That's why I'm saying Ahmedabad. 2010, Ahmedabad had a major heat wave, and we analyzed the data of birth and death in Ahmedabad during that May of 21st May 2010. Temperature reached 47 degrees. Now, normally Ahmedabad has 100 deaths a day. That day, 300 deaths happened. In just one day, it tripled. Similar things we have recorded in chikungunya epidemic. 2006, there has been chikungunya epidemic throughout the country. Ahmedabad birth and death registration data showed in 3 months, 4,000 additional deaths happened, and still government said no deaths. So my rough estimate and short answer is about 5 to 10 times more deaths must be happening for because normally the crematoriums are 30% full daytime, maybe 40-50% full. Now, for them to overflow day and night, you have to have at least 4 times the number of bodies coming there. Then it will start overflowing at day and night time, and then there will be queues. So of course, this is not of average all over India, but many parts where there is major increase in the deaths.
Yeah, one question supplement to this, Dr. Dilip, you are implying that deaths are not uniformly distributed. This is quite understandable. Given that whatever it is, even I'm talking a COVID death. Now, if COVID deaths are even 5 to 10 times, are you saying the COVID deaths are 5 to 10 times, or the total deaths are 5 to 10 times?
The COVID.
Yeah. So COVID deaths are 5 to 10 times. Plus, in some of the areas, total deaths are also maybe 3 to 5 times the normal.
Okay.
Then it will
Okay.
start overflowing. The other thing I want to also clarify, suppose take Ahmedabad, Delhi, if instead of 100, there are 500 deaths happening, large percent will be COVID, there will be some percent, maybe 20-30% of deaths because non-COVID serious emergencies could not get care. Suppose somebody developed heart attack, somebody developed stroke at home, there is no hospital which will be treating. Every hospital, every doctor, everything is now COVID. So that kind of additional mortality also may be happening. And that is why there is a lot of now push saying as COVID numbers are coming back, free up the normal hospitals for regular care and have separate COVID hospitals for COVID care, especially third phase preparation. There are lots of doctors saying that don't combine or don't take up normal care because normal care anyway is needed. Even if we are in lockdown, people do fall sick.
So, thank you very much. Thank you.
So
Plus, there are
I
also
think
many people made modeling estimates of mortality, and they also show about 3, 4, 5 times, 10 times some of the COVID deaths.
Yeah, so that is the estimate. I think, but real numbers we will get maybe after 1 year when SRS estimates of these crude death rate comes. If it increases to say how many times from 7 to 10, then maybe 30% more or something like that. So at present, we can say these are only guess or estimates.
Sure, sure.
So any other person who has a question, kindly comment.
Sir, this is Krishnanand Tripathi from ETV Bharat. May I ask my question to Dr. Dilip?
Yes, sure.
Dr. Dilip, I just want to ask you what went wrong with India's vaccination strategy and how to fix it. And can we fix it before the third wave?
Before third wave seems to be difficult because it looks like third wave, if we are unlucky, will come in 3 months. If we are lucky, maybe in 5 months, something like that. Also depends on how we behave. Third wave may not also come. But 3 to 5 months at the current rate, even if the new vaccines come, because see, plants have to be expanded for local production to increase. Gujarat government is now doing MOU with Bharat Biotech. It will take 3 months before the vaccine manufacturing increases. Foreign, just today's news is that we can get 5 crore, 10 crore, something like that from foreign suppliers because everybody is booked. And not only vaccine, you try to buy any medication required for COVID related, everything is sold out. You try to buy oxygen machines, they said not available because everybody is buying oxygen machines. So not only vaccine, but yes, I think it will be difficult. The other thing is that in January, I had given a different strategy for vaccination which nobody paid attention. Which in smallpox times it was called ring vaccination strategy. So wherever there are cases, you vaccinate 200 houses around that. Don't vaccinate the whole country. Say Northeast had very few cases. Why do you vaccinate everybody in the same ways? The risk is not the same everywhere. In January, we did analysis. Out of the published data, there are 740 districts of India. Only 50 districts had 60% of the cases and 60% of the deaths. So if you had focused on those 50 districts and gave everybody vaccine there, we could have managed in less vaccine. Even now, because now, of course, the disease has much spread in rural areas. So now this strategy has to be reworked, saying how do we reduce it in urban and rural areas. But in January, February till March, we had a window where, for example, Maharashtra was contributing 60% of the cases. Serum Institute had 10 crore doses available. Maharashtra population is 12 crore. If we could have bought, Maharashtra government had bought and given everybody, if they were allowed and they were willing, Maharashtra epidemic would have stopped. Similarly, Kerala and Punjab, they were the 3 states were contributing almost 80% of the cases at one point.
Second thing, where the blame lies, it lies with the union government, their strategy, because still it is dependent on the CoWIN portal, which doesn't seem to work for many people, those who don't have access to modern technology or modern phones. And they also delayed ordering. So where the blame lies? If we want to fix the accountability, where the blame lies?
It's not blame. I am surprised that all the sports which have taken suo motu cognizance have not taken up this issue. This is a main human right issue. You can't say that if you don't have a phone, I will not give you vaccine. Similarly, in Ahmedabad, Ketan knows there was a big debate. They said you must come in the government 108 ambulance, otherwise we will not admit you to the government facility. So if you are even staying just opposite the hospital door, you have to call up the ambulance. Ambulance will take, there was so much overloaded, it will take 1 day to come to your place. You survive till 1 day, then you will get the ambulance and then you go 50 yards and enter the hospital. Such kind of ridiculous policies are there. This policy of booking is one of these ridiculous policies. How can you say that unless you have a phone, unless you can book? My mother, who is 95 years old, she is bedridden. I also said in my own committee, saying make a provision for home vaccination. How will she You have to hire an ambulance, take her to the center, expose her to all 50 people who are standing there in the queue and get vaccinated. Is that the way? So I think this IT thing is sometimes taken to the other extreme. It is useful, but you can't say that everything will be done like that.
Thank
Any
you,
other
sir.
question? Any other question?
Can
Sir,
I
this
ask
is
one
Dr.
question?
Mahesh. Sir, this is I have two things to get a clarification from the Dilip sir. I'm audible, sir.
Yes, sir.
Sir, my concern is one thing based on your experience on the Indian public health system. How can we improvise the existing public health system which can work more effectively? As you have noted, something like Indian Health Service, something like that, much higher to that. So we have to improvise and make the public health system to work. Is it, can you suggest only it's a kind of public-private partnerships which are not happening in the health sector? How to make more effective functioning of this kind of a stuff, one. And secondly, you have raised the issue of Ahmedabad case of these death issues, which are much higher than 5 to 10% of what is reported now. What is your opinion on the COVID reporting cases, sir? Is it in the same way, or is it we can trust the numbers, or which is much higher than what is reported, sir? Thank you.
Yeah, so COVID cases, let me address because first question, how to improve efficiency is a lecture by itself. So I don't want to get into
true,
it
sir.
because it's a long, of course, we need to have more professional managers. We need to have better systems. And I showed you some of the things which we need to do. It's a long thing of how to improve efficiency. But public-private partnership could be one of the ways, like what Britain did. As the general practitioner earns through getting more patients. Our PHC doctors, they are interested in driving away the patients because salary doesn't depend on the number of patients they see. So why should anybody see the salary? So minimum patients, you are getting the same salary. I'm just exaggerating. It's not really true. A lot of good doctors are there. But you do have to have some kind of incentive in today's world for your people on a larger scale to perform. And some states have already done that. So your other question was about the numbers for COVID cases. It is more complicated because it highly dependent on testing. How much testing and how efficient testing are you doing? Now, maybe the some state numbers look too small to be believable. So there would be, and within the COVID also, there are estimates of 20 to 30 times more infections. So which is different than what is the COVID cases. So if you look at the sero surveillance, 20% of India is infected. Now 20% of India gives you a number, something like 25 crore. So actually 25 crore people are infected, but our reported numbers are 2 crores. So 10 times less. So this is even a more difficult. The other thing is many states are not reporting how many RT-PCR tests they do and how many rapid tests they do. Because the more rapid tests you do, the more cases you will miss. Of course, it is rapid has its own advantage. So with all that taken into account, my sense is roughly maybe like there will be 2 times the number of cases than what we are reporting, maybe 3 times, something of that order. Cases, and so people with symptoms, not asymptomatic infection will be 10, 20 times more.
Okay. Thank you, sir.
Can I ask a question? Can I ask
Dr.
a
Anthony?
question?
Yeah,
Yes.
Dr. Anthony, go ahead.
I'm Dr. K.R. Anthony calling from Cochin. Dr. Maulankar, you remember me for the Safe Motherhood program from UNICEF side.
Yes, Dr.
Okay.
Anthony.
My question is, as your futuristic budgeting for 1,000 rupees voucher for per family for consultation and and the medicines and the purchase of medicine. My question is, even when the National Health Mission started, we found the system cannot do all these expected function without an additional staff. That's the whole reason the whole lot of district program manager, block program managers, a lot of epidemiologists, a lot of accountants, and a lot of people were appointed on managerial functioning, as well as at the bottom level, the nearly 8 lakh or 9 lakh of ASHAs per village as a solution. They're all temporary. ASHAs are honorarium workers and others are all contractual workers. Now, this is a myth. We have proved over 5 to 8 years. Now, their function is essential to run the system. So we have to make a strong plea for regularization of that many posts, and probably you can wean them off if they are not efficient. Different mechanism, don't give them permanent appointment, but it is not a short-term contractual appointment. We have to budget it, and that's an assured expenditure of increasing the total health budget. Do you agree on that?
Yeah, I think your point is very well taken, but all governments are very, very wary of increasing any staff, especially the permanent staff, which is unfortunate. But the other side of the government's argument is when a staff becomes permanent, they stop working. Their productivity goes down. I don't know what is the experience. Many people are from government. But yes, in some sense, if you compare internationally, our bureaucracies or our public systems are much, much smaller than what I told you. Sweden, I told you, one nurse per 100 people. And all government paid, all permanent. Of course, they may be changing. Ketan might know better. But even a midwife, she sees 6 patients in a day or 8 patients in a day. It gives 1 hour per patient or per pregnant woman in the first appointment and half an hour in the second appointment. So that is the level of that person, something Chhatri, I don't know what. But when it comes to investing in people, forget about that. Take now, of course, there is new breed of universities which are funded by business people. But so far, our money philanthropy went into temples and went into many other things, but not really human capacity development. Somehow, if we really want to compete internationally, what is our competing advantage? Human brain. We have the largest number of human brains. But if they are not well developed, we will be digging ditches and doing MGNRA work type of work rather than developing something which internationally is valuable, which China did. Why is China so much ahead? Because they invested in health and education during communist times for a long time and reasonably, and now in universities, research, if you see, and we can do it. It's not that we cannot do it, but our priority so far, the other side is that as a nation, we are a nation of rote learners. We are not nation of thinkers, or we are not encouraging questions. We are suppressing questions. Our teachers are saying, चुप रहो, सुनो मैं क्या बताता हूँ, question मत पूछो. Which we need to change, and that whole mentality is continuing because of I don't know what and how to change it. Of course, small countries have different cultures, etc. In Sweden, I have been going, and their PhD defense is a public event. Anybody can come and ask anybody any question. You're most welcome. And the PhD thesis is put on the wall for everybody to read after it is approved. Taking cue from Martin Luther, who put the Bible's other version for people to protest. So my sense is we have to learn how do we make our society better and invest in people. And that is what Kerala, I didn't bring an example. I'm tempted because you said from Kerala. With one of the small projects, I took a group of health officers across India to see Kerala. So there was this, I don't know, IS or some senior officer from health department of Rajasthan. So in the evening, they took us to see the palace of the some Kerala king. So when we went to that palace, he started laughing. What is this? This is not a palace. He said, you see, Rajasthan palaces, they're so bigger. Some small fellow has this type of a house. So I had to tell him, the Kerala kings did not build palaces. They invested in education, health, other things. That's why they don't have these small palaces, where Rajasthan people, the kings invested in big palaces. So people are poor, but palaces are big. So that is what I think we as a nation have to think.
Yeah. Thank you. It was a good presentation.
Excellent questions, answers. We have already run out of time.
Yes, sir.
If there is any,
So one last,
we can take one
sir.
question also. Yeah, last question, please.
I have one
Nimandeep
question.
Singh, I just wanted to ask you on the preventive healthcare for the elderly care people. And in your whole presentation, nowhere the discussion has gone for the preventive healthcare policies in the from the India government perspective. And can that be the game changer for the whole healthcare system?
Are you saying overall or for the elderly?
So it's overall only, but since I'm focusing on fall prevention for elderly, so I was just concerned for that. But then it's overall also, because in our thing, we don't even bother about prevention.
It is true that I did not emphasize overall, but vaccination is prevention. I also talked about at the end social determinant, water is prevention. But yes, you're right. In one 20 or 40-minute presentation, you can't. But prevention is, of course, important. It is difficult to convince politicians for investing in prevention, because when you invest, you don't see the results unless you have good statistics to show. People not dying is not very easy to show. But making a building or making something very large is easy to show. But your point is well taken.
Last question we can.
Can I have one question? One last clarity from the very good presentation. The rules which you have said about the COVID mortality data. One point which you said that COVID, mild COVID, but the patient may have died of a stroke or heart attack and everything. It's a gray area, because if the patient is having COVID, it may be a cause actually. So how you are explaining that? I need a clarity on that, because that will affect the data, COVID data. Second question is about telemedicine. I'm not going ahead now, because in India there is a legal and ethical challenges, and also we cannot compare with Canada and all, because we are. You have already said about the health infrastructure, and your own grandmother, taking her to the hospital will be, education, health awareness challenges to continue with telemedicine in for the common people, poor people. So two questions. One is a clarity of COVID death, because mild COVID and stroke and all may be the reason for death. How we can, clarify what is your answer? Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Yeah. So why I put this, normally it should be taken as COVID death, but somebody will argue that if your blood parameters are all normal, because first week COVID blood parameters are all normal, you are having like a common flu, and how did you develop? There is no mechanism. In the second, third week, or if your blood parameters are abnormal, clotting is very high, then yes, thrombosis happens, you can have heart attack, and that would be COVID. But what I was trying to say is, incidentally, somebody who has very bad heart disease can develop COVID, and then the death could be because of, and if you want to really come to the conclusion, you have to do postmortem. Unfortunately, we have stopped doing, pathology departments have stopped doing postmortem. I was surprised. Only forensic medicine or where there is medical legal people are doing postmortem. So a detailed history with some understanding of what was the nature of and severity of disease can help decide. Unfortunately, what happens is once person dies, we forget about him and just dispose the person, and we are not a society where we ask questions saying, why did this person die? Could we have prevented his death, because that means you have to be self-critical, and which in some sense is very difficult. Your second question was, I forgot.
Telemedicine.
Telemedicine.
Legally, yeah.
No, there are challenges. I'm not saying it is easy, but how difficult it is for a rural tribal person to reach the district headquarters for a consultation and go back. So instead of that, if you had a good telemedicine system, and there are many models now developing,
Right.
you could do limited. You can't do cesarean section through telemedicine, but you can do psychiatric consultation, you can do skin consultation, you can do many other simple consultations or even follow-up care. So there are many parts to telemedicine, and some of them can be done. Now we have the technology, we have broadband, we have whatever in many places. So the potential is there.
Thank you.
Okay. Yeah.
So thanks, Dr. Mavalankar. But before we leave, I request
I would like
Karan.
to thank Dr. Ratan. Dr. Ratan, I would like to thank you for approaching Dr. Mavalankar and inviting him to the IGRO Foundation talk series. This has been so enlightening. I'm surprised, I'm impressed, and I'm going to emulate Dr. Dilip Mavalankar in his frankness. I always thought if you're working with the government, you are suppressed. Sometimes you don't speak the truth. But the way today Dr. Mavalankar has demonstrated to us, we professionals have to speak the truth. And the way he demonstrated the Taj Mahal model, I think is mind-blowing, where the investment should be. The Kerala model that he has mentioned is another extremely good example to realize what should be the public policy. Should it be pompous and showy, or should it be at the grassroots level, investing in education and in health? We all know Kerala is way ahead than rest of the country as far as education and health is concerned. And the more you listen to professionals, like Dr. Mavalankar, you learn so much. The Swedish model of the midwifery is a great example. I think today was a great learning day. And Dr. Ratan Chand, I must thank you for inviting, identifying, and seeing that Dr. Mavalankar, despite his such a busy schedule, is able to speak to us. I'm still recovering from COVID. I've come back after 22 days in a COVID ward in a government hospital. And many of the things that Dr. Mavalankar was saying were ringing true in my own heart, because inside the COVID ward, you see death very closely. And therefore, I was not able to join and correlate the overflowing crematoriums with the statistics as Mr. Mavalankar has presented to us, and the frankness with which he speaks 5 to 10 times more. I really respect you, Dr. Mavalankar. I've heard you for the first time, and I think professionals like you and me and others on this panel have to learn without hurting, without taking ideological positions, to speak the truth so that the nation progresses. In this special series that IGRO Foundation is doing, bringing the best minds in the country to speak on issues like this, we have Professor Gopal Naik from IIM Bangalore speaking to us on May 31. He will be speaking on teleeducation and telemedicine. When I was a professor, RBA chair at IIM Bangalore, he had taken me to demonstrate in a far-off village how telemedicine works. Professor Mavalankar is right. Telemedicine may not help us in the cesarean operation, but telemedicine in 2013, when he took me and we saw how effective telemedicine can be, I thought it can be very, very useful for a country like us. Very widespread country, 7 lakh villages, and many, many places where literacy is not there. Brick and mortar clinics and public health centers are difficult to afford. I think telemedicine is the way forward. In the current situation, when the COVID has entered hinterlands, affecting villages and families, how important is telemedicine? Otherwise, if we get into the hand of the quack, something very serious can become far more severe and devastating. So therefore, telemedicine, I think, is the future. And I invite all of you on May 31, Monday, 5 p.m., Professor Gopal Naik on telemedicine and teleeducation, the way he has run it for nearly 10 years. In IIM Bangalore campus, telemedicine and teleeducation hub was run, and Professor Gopal Naik was the in charge of it. I would invite all of you to please come and spend an hour with us. With this, thank you once again to Dr. Mavlankar, to Dr. Ratan Chand, and all the participants who enriched the discussion today. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Mavlankar,
Yeah.
with folded hands for agreeing to this. And, thanks to all the participants. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much. It was delightful.
Thank you. It was a wonderful session.
Yes, to see